Good evening, everyone. We'll open up the September 2nd City Council work meeting and bring that to order. Is there a motion on tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda for the September 2nd City Council work meeting.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Jack, could you take roll call vote, please?
Mayor Voss,
Aye.
Councilman Harrington,
Aye.
Councilperson Ronning,
Aye.
Councilperson Urkel,
Aye.
Councilperson Plassance.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, on to item 3, the CARES Act business assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city of East Bethel has received $906,268 in CARES Act funding. The CARES Act provides that payments from the fund may only be used to cover costs that are necessary expenditures incurred due to public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus disease 2019. Were not accounted for in the budget most recently approved as of March 27th, 2020 for the state government, and were incurred during the period that begins on March 1st, 2020 to November 15th, 2020. Cities must spend the funds and payments be issued by November 15th, 2020. As part of the program, assistance is available to businesses impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses must meet the eligibility requirements of the Act to qualify for the grants. Below are the steps and recommendations for moving forward with the grant relief program for businesses and nonprofits for the City of East Bethel's CARES Act allocation. We will request assistance from the Anoka County Regional Economic Development with the city's grant program. A basic outline of the steps for the program are as follows. Review business and nonprofit grant program options, designating funds for businesses and/or nonprofit programs, set eligibility requirements and monetary caps on grants, bring programs to the City Council for approval, utilize application items that the county provides, decide on the application format, either a first-come, first-served basis, process grants the city received for a set period of time or until the funds run out, or open up application windows, review all applications, and at the end of the application window, allocate the awards equally, approve and process grant agreements with all recipients prior to issuing grant checks, establish an audit process grant for recipients. And the county is asking all recipients to send in proof on how grant funds were utilized. We will follow up and randomly audit any business that did not provide any information. As a city, we can choose to audit every recipient, randomly audit, or not audit at all. The East Bethel City Council is considering expanding the CARES Act funds for an emergency small business grant program. There would be approximately $150,000 available to the grant program. The maximum grant amount could be capped at a fund amount of $10,000 if awards are made on funding the applications as they are received, or could be determined after all applications are received and allocated on an equal basis. Jaquel Hyder, Anoka County Regional Economic Development Director, will review the county program and outline options for a separate city program or a merged program with the county, with the council at this work meeting tonight. No city funds would be used for this program. Monies received from the CARES Act would cover any cost for this assistance. The impact of federal assistance to affected business will be yet to be determined. At the conclusion of the discussion of the options available to the city, staff will request direction from council for this proposal on how to proceed. This time I'll turn it over to Jaquel, and she can present an outline of the county's program and how they can assist the city in our endeavor if we want to follow this as part of our expenditure of our CARES Act money. Jaquel?
Hi.
Good evening.
You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me tonight. Great to see all of you. I'm going to turn my video on. I promise I'm not driving. My husband is driving. But so where Jack came from, the overview that he provided was kind of a summary of what him and I had talked about for the last couple of weeks, as many of the cities around the county have created grant programs with their CARES Act allocations. How much they set aside is dependent upon each city. How much they give out in terms of grants has been a little different for each city as well. So I'm here to just provide you guidance on what you can choose and what's kind of federally consistent amongst all the programs. So the county right now has an application actually open for businesses. So any East Bethel business is eligible right now. I think we have 4 applications from businesses in East Bethel, and I can't tell you who they are. But that being said, if you did a grant program, a business could technically apply for our grant and get a city grant if they have enough eligible expenses. March 1st, when the
We're starting to lose you. Jacob.
All right, that might help. Sometimes video breaks up the service. So the last thing I had mentioned was what other communities are doing and where the so we are at a spot where we're going to continue to allow more applications. We are going to open up our businesses to up to 50 FTE, and we are also going to allow businesses to get multiple grants as long as they have enough eligible expenses. So just like the city is using CARES Act dollars to help with any costs that they incurred that weren't budgeted for due to the pandemic, the businesses can pretty much do the same thing or just cover any normal operating expenses that they've had with the idea that they lost revenue either from being closed or just from people not coming to their business, and this helps them pay for those expenses. So it's great. Many cities have 12 of the 21 cities in Anoka County have grant programs. So if East Bethel moves forward, it wouldn't be uncommon from your peers. The choices that you can make on your program is, do you want to open it up to home-based businesses? That might be something that would be more reflective of your business community in East Bethel. Another thing is, how do you want to cap the employer size? What's common across all cities in Anoka County has been 50 FTE, so 50 full-time equivalent, because many restaurants or small businesses have 80 employees, but maybe only 30 are full-time equivalent because a lot of them are part-time. Another factor that we've seen consistent is the grant amounts. We've seen a lot of $10,000 amounts, but there are certain cities that aren't capping the grant amounts. They're just having businesses or nonprofits apply and submit all eligible expenses, and then they'll approve them, kind of depending on whether or not they're oversubscribed. So, for instance, if they can do 200 applications and give out $10,000 grants, or they only get 100 applications and then they can give out $20,000 grants. What I would recommend is not recreating the wheel. This stuff is a lot of paperwork, a lot of time. What the county has provided the city is a grant program guideline that you can start with and make tweaks to. We can provide copies of vendor agreements. We can get the city connected with a vendor. There's 2 options. You can either work with Ellers or Baker Tilly. I'm not sure who your financial advisor is as a city, but either one of those advisors are capable of helping you take in applications and make sure they fit the criteria. And then from there, I can also help you with, grant agreements, give you copies that you can tweak to your city program. So we can, as a county, with the AC Red partnership, we can pretty much provide a lot of assistance here. It's just a matter of, does East Bethel want to allocate some of these CARES Act dollars to fund this program, and what criteria makes sense? So I'll pause with that and let Jack add anything else.
Jaquel, are any of the communities utilizing contract grant administrators to administer the program on behalf of the city?
Most of them are, except for Spring Lake Park and Andover. The city of Andover is the only city that actually had an application before the county did. They received 29 applicants. They did up to $50,000 grants. Andover had set aside 1.8 million in their business relief pool. So really large. They were the largest city grant and the largest pool of money towards the business relief program. They've only been able to administer about $1 million worth of grants. I can say from experience, the cities that are not using grant administrators, either they have the staff capacity, the staff experience, or they're not going to receive very many grant applications. We've told all the cities, if you receive less than 10 or 15 grant applications, myself and Karen Skepper, we can both assist in reviewing those in-house and help you without bringing in a grant administrator. Now, if you have a large pot of money and you're planning on giving out a lot of grants, that's when you either need to decide, do we have the staff capacity in-house to kind of verify these grant applications, or should we hire someone? If you do hire someone, you can use your CARES Act dollars for additional administration fees.
Ellers is our financial advisor, and I'm sure we would probably count on them to do certain things if council decides to do this. It's reassuring too, and we certainly appreciate the offer of the county's assistance. If there are a limited number of grants, we will be having to discuss which way we'll be using that, because with everybody else and with the COVID-19 implications and ramifications, our capacity for doing them in-house is somewhat limited.
Absolutely. And what I would recommend, just coming where we are at today, it's been like a puzzle piece, right? Everything's moving. You guys are very aware of how complicated COVID has been and how complicated these CARES Act dollars are. And then, you know, when it first came out 6 weeks ago, many of the cities wanted to be as consistent as possible. And now we quickly saw that every city has different needs. So everyone created different programs. So I also understand the type of businesses that are in East Bethel. There's a lot of construction and contracting that probably don't have a COVID impact, but you do want to serve your restaurants and your retail and maybe your home-based businesses as well that you do have. I would say if you're going to create a program, you want to complement the county's program and allow businesses to get more relief, right? So if they have 10,000 expenses from the county and then the city does a program, they can get even more money. Or open up your grant program to cover maybe a business that was not covered in ours. For instance, home-based businesses are not eligible. So Oak Grove and Ham Lake have both done a grant program, and they did allow home-based businesses to apply to their program. And so again, it kind of serves maybe an unserved population.
Was their program for home-based businesses, was that a separate program that was created apart from the normal storefront business operations?
Nope, it was the same. It was just part of the eligibility. Now, the one thing the vendor would have to review, or the city staff would have to review, is if they're submitting expenses, they're not submitting expenses that are personal. It's hard to kind of separate those. So if you do home-based businesses, I would definitely say you're really going to want either outside help from Ellers or myself. Again, if you have 15 or less, I can do those. But Ellers would be a really good person to bring on, because what they've been doing for the other cities is they won't set up the application and kind of fully take it over, but they'll say, hey, you guys run an application, whether it's paper or online, and collect all the stuff. We'll take those applications and we'll follow up and call all these businesses, whether they're home-based or not, and verify that they're consistent with the CARES Act, they're consistent with the city program. And then they'll come back to you and say, okay, here's a list of all the businesses we approved. Here's their W-9s. You guys just issued the checks. So it's pretty simple and efficient. And I think it's nice too, because you could probably work out a administration fee with them that's based upon how many applications they review.
Any questions for Jaquel? Randy?
Actually, I have a couple of questions. My first immediate comment is, you know, I think this is a very good idea to kind of help the businesses as best we can. I mean, that's kind of what we should be doing in our state of emergency, the way it stands. But my first question revolves around the fact that, Jaquel, that you had mentioned that a business could be receiving funds from you, and then they could also be receiving funds from us. But from what I'm reading in our packet, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it says if an applicant receives any funding from a local city and the county, applicant may only accept one of the grants. So is that statement not correct, or what's
Great
going
question.
on with that?
Yep. So right now, as I mentioned, the county opened up applications August 24th, and we're taking applications through September 3rd, which is tomorrow. And right now, we're sitting at about 110 applications. We could take 600. So we're undersubscribed. Obviously, just like the council, you have to decide what to do for the city. The county board is the one that set our program guidelines. So I did get back to them and said, hey, this is where we're at. Here are some guidelines you can expand. The number one item that was a concern from the start was limiting businesses from getting more than one grant. Because first off, it's hard for us to kind of, when we're all doing review at the same time, see who applied for what. You can put, so the county board did change that criteria today. And we haven't started reviewing applications, so no one's been penalized. Businesses have been encouraged to apply for a city and a county one regardless.
Okay.
Now at this point, the only thing that's really stuck on the business is making sure that they're aware if they got both, they're not covering the same expense. So for instance, if they get 10,000 from the county, let's use the Route 65 as an example. Let's say they got 10,000 from the county and they're going to use it to cover March, April, and May's lease or mortgage payment. That gets them to 10,000 right there. They don't have to submit. They don't have to tell us what their payroll or other expenses are. It's just more or less for here's what you got the grant for. Then they can apply for the cities, and depending on what your amount is, let's say it's 10 also, they can submit $10,000 worth of expenses to your program. So they can get both now with the revised criteria that the county board set. They just can't double dip the same expense. And that's the same as like PPP or SBA EDIL funding. They can receive those funding and still get our grant. They just, again, can't double dip the funding.
So they need to itemize their what they need for this COVID relief. Okay.
What their relief is going to, yep. And
Sure.
that's where, to some degree, there's some verification front. And that's where like the state auditor is going to come back and say, how did you guys run this program? Here's our program guidelines. Here's what we reviewed. They're going to say, great, you did everything right. And then the grant agreement is what kind of puts it on the recipient of that responsibility of saying, hey, if you did get a city and a county one, great, good for you. You need the help, but you have to acknowledge that you didn't use it for the same expense. And if you did, and you find out later on from an auditor, you're responsible for paying that.
Okay. So then my
pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. So my next question revolves around the audit. Is we're supposed to be auditing each of these businesses if we choose. And so my question is, if we are auditing any of these businesses for these funds, is the city eligible for some of the money that is included in this CARES Act business assistance in order to cover that for the city?
Administration fee could be an eligible expense. Yep.
Okay.
So
And
auditing that could be something you could work out with your. So if you wanted Ellers to come back and maybe that audit doesn't actually happen until after your November deadline. If it's part of your scope of work, one of the things that you could outline that you're asking as a responsibility is that, okay, they review and verify applicants are eligible. Great. That's the first. Two, they submit, a list of who's approved and a report of everyone they've approved to the city. And number three, they do maybe a 5% audit, or maybe they audit half of the recipients or all the recipients. That's a decision the council will make. But that's one way you could structure it so that you don't worry about running out of admin fees before the CARES Act dollars have to be turned in or allocated for.
okay. So then my third question revolves kind of around home-based businesses, and you know, my first inclination is that I would like to include home-based business as long as they have an IUP and they're current on keeping their business updated. So I'm open to that idea. I'm willing to hear what the rest of the council thinks about that. But I mean, just because, I mean, there's some home-based businesses that really have been affected, you know, by this emergency declaration. So I would be more than willing to include them. As for how we're going to divvy out, you know, what is going to be done, I guess my feeling is that we should have. I'm not really a fan of the first come first serve basis. My preference is that we open up a window for applications to put in their expenses. If we can cover all of those expenses, then my feeling is fine. Just leave it as what each business has requested. However, I think if you know, there is a discrepancy where, you know, we have so many applications and it's over the funds that we have available, that I think we're going to have to find some way to evenly allocate those grants as needed, or equally, as best we can. I think that completes my concerns about
And I could help you
this
quick
proposal.
before everyone weighs in. So I thought that would help is if you have an application deadline, it helps you set a spot if you're oversubscribed. So let's say you guys have 100,000, you can do $10,000 grants. Maybe that's what your idea is, and maybe you get 20 applications. That way, you have a deadline to review them and say, how are we going to change it to give everyone $5,000 grants? Do we serve everyone? Do we want to look and see who had the highest COVID impact? And really, the only way to determine that is see if anyone was forced to close due to an executive order, or do we want to randomly pick? So if you have a deadline, at least it cuts off a time where you can kind of play with those variables and say, okay, we don't know how many applications we get. We don't know what the need is until you really don't know until you do an application. So it's nice to have an idea of how you're going to handle it, but then have a cutoff date for the applications. I really haven't seen any other city or county do a first come first serve basis because everyone likes that date where they can pick what they have and see what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, I think to me that seems to be the fairest and the you know, the approach that has the less amount of issues, is to have that deadline. The question is though on the deadline, seeing that the county's deadlines tomorrow and I know other cities' deadlines are coming up, we were a little bit, you know, perhaps behind the ball on this, but where do you think we sit on Jaquel in terms of setting deadlines, you know, for the application?
I think you're okay. So the county, again, we are going to do tomorrow. You'll get a full communication package from us, basically, and a press release will go out tomorrow afternoon. So I'm giving you guys a heads up. But because we're undersubscribed, I mentioned one of the criteria that was shifted was allowing businesses to get a city and a county or city and a state. That's one of them. The other one is we're going to open up another application window the 8th through the 18th of September with those revised criteria. So anyone that maybe couldn't apply before can now apply. Businesses know they can get multiple grants, all of that. So if you're anywhere around kind of by the end of September getting your applications in, you're okay. The city of Fridley, the city of Coon Rapids are also taking in applications through, I believe, the second or third week of September. So you're not the only one. There's another 4 cities that are running applications kind of concurrent with the county's window. And then the last city, Anoka, is kind of in the same spot as you. The city of Anoka at least has a program outline already adopted, but they do not have an application window locked in yet. So you wouldn't be too far off. I would just say you want to give yourself the entire month of October to help get those grant administration. I mean, you're really kind of close on the time, but you can do it because I don't think you're going to have a ton of applications. I would anticipate maybe 20 or less, just knowing what other cities have received.
Yeah.
If I understood correctly, there are two sources, the county and the city can issue these grants, and they're not supposed to be duplicates. Is that correct? Hello?
For some reason, I can't hear you, Tom.
Oh, I believe I understood that there's potentially two sources, one from the county and one from the city for this money. Am I there now?
Jaquel, did you hear that?
I just finally started hearing you.
Okay. There's two sources, if I understand correctly, and I didn't hear whether it was discussed. Is there a coordination between the two so we don't look at redundancies on the side of both parties? We aren't both going down the same trail. We will know what you're granting and you will know what we're trying to grant. Yep, does that make sense?
Did you get that, Jaquel? What Tom's asking is if, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but if an applicant applies to both the county and the city, how does the county and the city know that they're not applying for the same costs?
Exactly.
So that's part of the review. I know the cities that have already completed applications like Andover have submitted who they approved. We're going to do the same to the cities, but that's where that grant agreement's really key to protecting you. You put it up front in your application, let them know, hey, if you're going to apply for both, you need to disclose so they can ask when they're reviewing both vendors, both the city vendor and the county vendor can ask the applicant when reviewing it, hey, I saw that you applied for city grant. You know, it was on the application that you can get both, but just verifying that you didn't submit it for the same expense. And you kind of let them know, did you or did you not? If they say, oh shoot, no, I submitted the same expense, the vendor gives them an opportunity like 5 days to resubmit new expenses. And then it's in that grant agreement, like, okay, at that point, if they submitted new expenses and they said these are different than the city or the county, so you can't chase people around forever, right? You can't, otherwise it'd take us a year to get these dollars approved. But then you put that responsibility on the grant agreement between the city and the recipient that, okay, here's your dollars. You're agreeing that it's different expenses. The vendor's done their due diligence to question that and ask that. But at the end of the day, you can't track everything. So that's where that kind of protects you and it puts that risk on them. So you're asking it, you're asking the questions, your vendor's asking the question. They have the responsibility to submit information accurately, just like any other answer to a question on the application. They're assuming that, or we're assuming they're answering it correctly. And we can do some assurance, but then at the end of the day, you put some of that risk onto them with that grant agreement.
Jaquel, is there a certification or something within the application that the applicant signs saying that, yes, we haven't, submitted the same costs through multiple grant programs?
There isn't a certification, but there's a question. So it's not like you can't really get them to sign anything because it would just be still their word against what we know. But you ask those questions, you have a very diligent application. The benefit to you guys coming behind some of the other cities is you can utilize other applications that cities have already created, like the application that we've created, and just repurpose that because they work well. It already asks a lot of those questions that kind of filter people out. You know, have you applied for XYZ? They answer yes, they answer no. Now, if an applicant is ask the question, did you receive PPP funding? Did you receive a county CARES Act grant? And they say no, and they did, your vendor is not gonna know that. So that again is 100% on their responsibility.
So,
Randy made a good comment about helping people, and when we get to the limit, we're to the limit. It would be certainly helpful if we can understand as soon as possible, understand who might be going through the county, who's going through the city, and if there's a method or a way that we could refer them to the county if the city's maxed out, and if there's anything left. So we cover all the bases as best we can. Thank you.
Yeah, I got a sense based on Jaquel's comment that there were only 4 businesses at East Bethel applied to the county so far.
So far, correct.
Yeah, we're probably not gonna max out on our applicants, but you never know.
Do all the businesses know about it though?
I'm sorry, Tim, what was that?
Do all the businesses know about this CARE grant, or is it just these 4 found out, or, I mean, does everybody know that there's money out there? These other businesses?
We have,
Like, we can't knock on everyone's door.
Yeah.
Oh, correct.
Have been sharing it.
Okay.
Yep. Tim, we have not advertised it because we have not endorsed this as part of our CARES Act expenditures. This was, I think Stephanie appeared before the Chamber of Commerce in July and made the announcement to them that funds at that time were available through the county. So that probably reached out to about at least 75 businesses and whatever words of mouth that came from that. We've only had 2 requests for us to look into this. One of them was a local nonprofit, which did not meet the guidelines because their employment exceeded the federal requirements. And we had a business that inquired to us about some assistance prior to the CARES Act back in March, and we haven't heard anything back from them since then. Should we go down this road, our method of advertising this would be through the chamber, the reader board, Channel 10, and any other outlets that we have.
Okay, thanks.
Suzanne, you think you?
thank you. I was wondering if you would go through the dates again. You said there was a deadline tomorrow, and then the application acceptance are supposed to be through what dates? And what's the deadline for tomorrow?
So deadline tomorrow is for our first round of funding, September 3rd, and then we're opening up a second application window, September 8th through 18th.
And that's the county deadline. We can obviously have longer deadline.
Yeah, the big key for us on a deadline is we need to have all the grants we're going to pay for through this fund before City Council on a bill list at our meeting on November the 9th. And then that gets us under the window of having these funds approved and expended by our November the 15th deadline for the total program. Our deadlines can be extended beyond that of the county, and I agree with Jaquel. If we have a deadline that's somewhere on or near the end of September, that'll give us ample time through Ellers, the county, and what we can do to evaluate this, and then get those before City Council by November the 9th.
Well, we've discussed this program in the past, and I think council's all in consensus of we want to apply this program. Concern I have is actually getting this implemented and open up the applications. We can't make a decision in tonight's meeting as it is a work meeting. And our next council meeting is not for 2 weeks. So how, Jack and Stephanie, how soon do you think you could get the application and this whole thing set up for council approval?
We could definitely have something by the 14th. The 14th, our first step would be to sit down with Jaquel and see what assistance that she can provide us and what direction and guidance she can give us to go. But I feel certain that we can have something set up by no later than the 14th.
And then we'd have this 2-week application process.
Essentially 2 weeks, or we could even extend that into the first week of October, if we felt that that was necessary. I think with that, and we can announce to the chamber too, I'll have to check and see when their next meeting is, that the city possibly has a program, and for them to contact us after the 14th to find out the details of the program and the eligibility requirements.
Okay. Yeah,
We could have a special meeting.
Yeah, that's where I'm going at if we need to. So, there's only actually 6 work days before our next council meeting, that comes down to Labor Day next week. So, and I agree with Randy about the home-based businesses. I mean, not all of them are going to be affected, but I know there are some that were. And, we should talk about how to get them notified, whether we send out a postcard or how we do this. I think that's going to be our biggest challenge, is getting this information out to our businesses so they know it's available. I mean, we have a lot of businesses that aren't part of the chamber either. So,
one of the challenges with the home-based businesses is that the vast majority of those don't have any interim use permits, and we don't have any information on them. We could take our list of interim use permits that people hold for home occupations, notify those, but those that don't have the IUPs, we have no way of notifying them unless they see something through our other means of advertisements.
Well, and I think that's one of the criteria that we discussed too. I mean, Randy brought it up that, only businesses that have, their proper permits and everything's in place that's going to be eligible. So if that's the direction we take as a council, on our program, then we really don't need to worry about notifying them, because they're not going to be eligible. And I assume they're not going to try to go through IUP process in a short time just to get that. So that'll be our challenge. I mean, if they're paying attention, they've known about the CARES program for a while. It's just now it's finally getting, down to the ground. So, is there anyone that has reservations or doesn't want to take this direction with this CARES Act, having a local program? I think we've had this discussion before. So I'm going to say the consensus is we need to move forward.
I'm good to go.
And kind of too sweet. There's only a few days to get this set for our next council meeting.
So my question on that particular point is, and I agree that, maybe we should set up a special meeting on this item, as Suzanne said. Because my concern is, if we wait until the 14th, is that going to allow staff enough time to inform all the businesses that, would have an opportunity to take advantage of this program, to get everything, filled out and sent into the city before the deadline ends? So I guess I'm just kind of want to just have that as the last thing is, should we, make a special session of council in order to just take care of this one issue before the 14th, or do you really think we can wait until the 14th to move forward on this particular item? Thanks.
Well, I think the 14th is going to be, that's when staff will have the program to us and the application to us, and that's when we approve it. Some of the details can be worked out that night, including which, I think we need to think about it a little bit, and staff needs to think about what home businesses would and would not be eligible. But in terms of notifying those businesses, I don't think we do any of that until after we've actually approved and set up this program for the city. So, like I said, there's only 6 work days until our next council meeting. So
The home-based business piece too, what I can do is, one of the vendors that we're working with is MCCD, Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. It's the mouthful. They are the group that runs Open to Business, if you've heard of that program. Well, MCCD ran Hennepin, Ramsey, Washington county's programs, their CARES Act dollars. And so they've got a lot of familiarity about how to process and approve. Now, we are not home-based businesses, but I know Hennepin County did, and MCCD had to review all of those. So what I'll do in the meantime is just talk. I know I'm talking with them tomorrow. I'll ask Tyler from that group about kind of what some pointers are, what some items are that maybe need to be in the application or reviewed for home-based businesses, just to set you guys up in a position where it's great to allow them. You just maybe want to make sure that you protect, again, that you're in alignment with the CARES Act dollars.
Yeah.
So Jack and staff, you're more than welcome to reach out to me when creating a program to bring to the council for approval. And I'm happy to help you too with the marketing of it. I know we're going to be doing a lot of marketing with the second round of grant funding. And part of the marketing, at least on the flyer piece that I have our communications team working on, says, it talks about how the county has, expanded our grant criteria with new eligibility, or new, more flexible eligibility. And then it also says, check with your local city to see if they have a grant. So it's universal to all cities, but that'll be another way that you can be kind of sharing that, like, hey, yep, we have a grant, or we're working on a program, stay tuned.
Okay.
So can I just, Mr. Mayor, I guess I'd like some clarification, because you've mentioned now at least twice that it's 6 days until our next council meeting. And the way I figure it is it's 12 days. Today's the 2nd. Our next meeting is on the 14th. So again, I was wondering if you wanted to do this sooner. So I mean, if we're willing to wait almost 2 weeks, I'm okay with that, as long as staff feels that they can implement this in time. But I just wanted to clarify, because I don't believe we have another meeting for 12 days.
Well, 12 calendar days, but there's 6 work days in those 12 days.
Fair enough.
Holiday next week. So.
Randy,
right,
it will take that time to develop something that will be as complete as possible to present to council. Jaquel's going to be covered up with stuff, so I'm sure she's not going to be able to work with us exclusively. We'll have to meet her schedule and timelines. We already have a lot of framework for it done, but it's going to take a few days to put it together.
No, thanks. I was looking for clarification. My thanks.
Yep.
1.2, just to let you know, I know when I had brought my program to the county board, it was at a time where I didn't have a vendor who was going to help me administrate it, but I was just trying to say, here's the program guidelines. I need kind of approval for that. That's what I needed, approval. And then I got a second approval to give myself and then 2 specific commissioners permission to kind of negotiate the vendor stuff without having to bring it to the board. That way, that didn't hold me up. You could do something similar. Let's say you have program guidelines, but you're not exactly sure how the vendor stuff is going to work. You could, have to bring it through the council to make sure everyone's comfortable and really takes ownership of the criteria and hashes that out. And then approve it contingent on any amendments that certain council members want, and also maybe approve, that staff can work with a vendor and maybe appoint 1 council member, appoint the mayor to verify that or something. So that might be one way, in case, again, if you get inches, maybe delegating a little bit of authority to either staff and maybe 1 council member, if that's not ready by that next meeting. So then you don't have to wait another 2 weeks.
Sure. Any other questions, suggestions for staff? Okay, Jack, you got enough direction? Stephanie?
We think so. Thank you.
Okay. Jaquel, thank you very much for being here tonight. This has been very helpful.
Yes, it has. Thank you very much.
Jack, Stephanie, I'm pretty open tomorrow and Friday, so just give me a call or set up a call. We'll take care of anything on my side.
Okay, we'll be in contact with you in the morning and see what times work best for you.
Thank you, everyone. Great
All right, thanks, Jaquel. Okay, on to item 4, Edmar Lane speed reduction, citywide speed limit. Jack.
Going back just as a basic review of this item, the city received a petition from 21 of the 34 residents on Edmar Lane west of Vickers Street requesting the posting of this road to a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. The current speed limit is 30 miles per hour. On July the 13th, 2020, the city placed a radar speed display unit on Edmar Lane to gather speed and traffic count data. From July the 13th through the 19th, the westbound traffic was counted. There was an average of 556 recorded at this location with an average speed of 18 miles per hour. From July 20th through the 24th, the eastbound traffic was monitored. There was an average of 266 vehicles counted at this site with an average speed of 15 miles per hour. The attachment in your packet gives the results of these traffic counts and speed data. On the first day the unit was in place, 13 speeding incidents were recorded. There were no other violations recorded over the next 11 days. From this information and strictly an analytical standpoint, the data from the speed study do not support lowering the speed limit. Minnesota Statute 169.14 addresses lawful speed limits for municipalities. Subsection 7 limits speed to 25 miles per hour in residential roadways if adopted by the road authority having jurisdiction over this roadway. In the case of Edmar Lane, the following factors tend to reduce excessive speeds. Number 1, Edmar Lane has a narrow pavement width most city streets. Edmar Lane has 30 driveway entrances along its 2,700-foot length between Vickers and the cul-de-sac. And there are 4 curves on Edmar Lane that serve as traffic calming measures. As we stated in our last discussion, most of the complaints involving speed violations at this location have involved delivery and garbage trucks. At the August 3rd, 2020 City Council meeting, Council directed staff to research the setting of a standard-wide speed limit for residential streets. As to Council's directives, the following are considerations that need to be factored in the decision to establish a citywide residential speed limit. Relative to enforcement, postings at state and county highway entrances to the city would not be sufficient notices of speed limits. Discussions with the Anoka County Sheriff's Office confirmed that citations issued with this limited posting pattern on higher speed roads could be successfully challenged in court. To sign what could be key intersections would require approximately 150 signs. Material costs for the sign installation would cost approximately $60 per sign. We would also have to set up a category of streets that would be classified as non-residential roadways. These streets would include, but not be limited to Palisade, 241st, 221st, 239th, 199th, 182nd, 183rd, 185th, Briarwood, and Valhalla. These streets would be classified as minor collector streets and be outside the speed reductions for residential roadways. City MSA streets are major collectors, and the differing tiers of street classifications coupled with the minimum speed limit signage on residential roadways could reduce the effectiveness of standard speed zones throughout the city. Cities we have researched that have imposed a citywide speed limit have posted gateway signs at entry points into their cities and at main intersections into developments as a means to effectively notice the postings. We also need to consider that lower speed limits do not reduce speeds. Studies have shown that there is little change in speed patterns after the posting of lower speed limits. Drivers are much more influenced by changes to the roadway and road conditions. Also, lower speed limits don't necessarily reduce traffic accidents. Lower speed limits are often viewed as a quick fix to traffic safety, but this is not always the case. Crashes are most often the result of other factors. In many cases, posting of lower speed limits creates a greater speed variance between the slowest and fastest moving vehicles. This variance can contribute to crashes and make the roadway less safe. As a result, staff recommend that City Council discuss any postponement of a decision to enact a citywide speed limit and consider speed limit reduction requests on a case-by-case basis, supported by documentation to justify the request.
Well, I think based on your report, John, it doesn't seem supportive nor be productive to this right now as a citywide speed limit.
That's our opinion, and you know, the things that we've noticed changes to roadway and weather conditions do affect speeds on roadways. The other thing that we've seen are the speed trailers or the display radar units like we have. You know, however, we don't have these to post all over the place. The cost of doing a citywide speed limit would cost us probably about $9,000 to $10,000 for signage. The other thing is too that we have certain streets in residential areas, like I say, that are really minor collectors. And posting them at 25 miles an hour, I think there would definitely be no adherence to that speed limit. It's something that's, you know, we might want to look into, not abandon, but if there's a way to tweak it, maybe we can come up with a different formula for it. But at this time, I would recommend that we just consider a request for speed reduction just on a case-to-case basis and justification of the reasons for that request for that particular street.
Any other thoughts?
I agree. Looking at that
Suzanne.
data, looking at that data, I didn't see any reason to change it. I don't think there's a lot of speeding going on that road. And I don't think we need to spend that kind of money on signs all over the city. So I kind of agree with Jack, I guess.
Randy?
Well, I mean, I was just, again, going through what was discussed and kind of what's going on here. It says the new law, which went into effect on August 1st, allows the city to adopt speed limits on its streets without a MnDOT involvement. And we can do it, reduce that speed to 25 miles per hour. Is that not correct, Jack?
That's correct.
So if it's currently 30, and we've had more than half of the residents requesting a reduction in speed, I realize they've asked for 20, but you know, in all reality, it doesn't look like we can do that. However, I think with, you know, it looks like 2/3 of the majority making this request, I think it would be prudent, even though I realize that, you know, with a speed study, it doesn't require us to reduce the speed or maybe even recommend it. I think with the request coming before us that we consider adopting the 25-mile speed limit on Edmar Lane. Thanks.
So I think firstly, there's three of us so far that have voiced, along with staff, that, you know, doing a citywide reduction of speed limit is not the way to go right now. So I'll assume that's the consensus of council. And then we have not addressed Edmar Lane directly, correct, Jack?
Correct.
So I think we just bring that up onto the next council agenda for Edmar Lane.
According to what I've heard Jack say so far, I believe we can define this as the residents are not the problem. The problem is pretty much the garbage trucks and the delivery. Now, if you think about what that problem is, we could put signage up there to reduce the speed limit, but you'll have to have patrolmen to make sure that somebody lives up to it. And what's the possibility of that happening? Or are we going to have to pay extra to start having more sheriff coverage for one street? It's kind of an odd situation. It's almost like you're not going to win. We can try to help them, but we might not be doing any good.
I think, you know, it may be just as or even more effective If it's the, delivering and garbage trucks, which I agree, I see them every day, is that we know who those companies are. They all have permits in the city. It is to just send a letter, have the city send a letter to the garbage firm saying we're getting complaints about speeds in neighborhoods. Just ask them to keep it, and let their drivers know and have them keep an eye on it, And I would also, if we do that, I would also send a letter to the school districts and let the bus drivers know. I mean, I will honestly say the school bus is the fastest driver in my neighborhood, no doubt. And I've trying to calm them down, to slow them down a little bit, but it's so counterintuitive to see school buses flying through a residential neighborhood. But I think, that letter would probably be more effective than trying to sign or try to enforce speed limits. Because you're right, Tom, we're not going to ask the sheriff department to set up on various residential streets and try to get a speeder. They're not going to do it, and we wouldn't ask them to do that. So.
I think your recommendation is the most effective and most reliable to get some results, period.
Yeah. Okay, so staff will bring this back, the Edmar Lane request, to our next council meeting.
Correct.
Any thoughts before we leave this subject? All right, on to item 5, city commission discussion.
Beginning in 2014, with the deliberations to merge the city's Housing and Redevelopment Authority into the Economic Development Authority, discussions regarding the combining or eliminating city commissions has been a topic that City Council evaluates as necessary. The city's Roads Commission is a citizen board that is briefed on project or items related to local streets and public right-of-way improvements and comments on these items to the City Council. There have been recent thoughts that the needs addressed by the Roads Commission have evolved beyond the intended reason for the establishment of this board. The original role of the Roads Commission was to review subdivision street plans to ensure they met city standards. As developments in the city have shifted from the traditional rural subdivision plats to planned unit developments, commercial projects that require utility services, and larger scale projects that require more engineering and legal oversight, this commission has at times been bypassed as a step in the review and approval process due to the time sensitivity required for these types of developments. The review process has gradually transitioned to staff and consultants over the years due to the complexity of many of the issues associated with these types of projects. East Bethel is one of only a few cities that has a roads commission. None of the northern Anoka County cities has a separate commission that deal exclusively with this matter. Most of these municipalities address transportation and local roads concerns at a committee level by their city engineer or through their planning commission. This approach eliminates an additional step in the plan review and permitting process. Currently, the primary function of the Roads Commission has been to review staff presentations relating to capital improvements plans, Class 5 resurfacing, and JPA street maintenance projects. Other requests such as street light installations, no parking proposals, and paving petitions have been heard. The final approval for any roads or public right-of-way improvements still rests with the City Council. The Roads Commission has experienced recent difficulties in attracting applicants for vacancies on the board. There's a current position which has been vacant since November 2019, a vacancy that was created on August the 3rd by the resignation of Dennis Murphy, and one of the members is in an interim post position. There will be one position that expires in 2021. Should there be further discussion on this matter, options in lieu of a Roads Commission could be the creation of a Roads Committee to address transportation needs, or the continuation of the Roads Commission with meetings on an as-needed basis. City Council received the staff report on the status of the Roads Commission at the August 3rd, 2020 work meeting and directed staff to present information on how a Roads Committee might work. The following is the process for the creation of a Roads Committee. Number 1, the repeal of the section of City Code that established the Roads Commission would have to be enacted, and then created by ordinance, a Roads Committee would be established and included in the ordinance, and would establish the structure of the committee with staff recommendations, the composition of the committee, including 2 council persons, city engineer, public works manager, and city administrator. Once the committee is established, meetings can be called at any time to discuss roads and street matters and forward information to the city council. Meetings can be held during the day or at the convenience of the member and generally require no special notices. Most meetings would be single agenda items to address time-sensitive concerns, give input to capital improvement plans, and provide recommendations for regulations relating to city streets. The meetings would follow a prepared agenda, and discussion on the items would result in directions to staff for presentation to City Council. This committee would perform the same function as the Roads Committee, but without the restrictions of the rigid meeting schedule set annually by resolution for the Commission. This flexibility provides the additional benefit of making it more accommodating for professional groups such as the Anoka County Highway Department and MnDOT representatives to attend these meetings. At this time, staff is seeking direction from the council on proceeding on this subject for further action.
All right, thoughts?
My thought is, I don't really think we need to get rid of the roads commission. I don't see, so there's 3 people on there, is that correct? Right now?
Currently, we have, with the resignation of Mr. Murphy and the other open seat, we have 5 members. One of those persons is only an interim member, and he's only there so we can have assurances that we'll have a quorum. There will be another vacancy that will come on at the end of this year, and that member has given us no indication whether they want to be reappointed or not. Our attempts to fill even the vacant seats now has gone on for about a year, so whether we can fill that or not remains to be seen.
Because there's such a bad echo. I'm not understanding why we can't change it so that if it's just 3 people who would discuss that, if there are some kind of recommendations that need to be done. I don't know that they need a whole quorum of 5 or 7 people because it's just a small advisory. They don't really do anything. I've never seen during my time on the board, none of their recommendations or lack of recommendations have been taken into consideration on anything that we voted on. So I think all they need to do is, observe and maybe decide if certain roads need to be upgraded or, the various things that they decide. And, if new roads need to be come in, that's my thinking. I think the create by ordinance roads committee, I think that's going to cost a lot more. And I don't think that's necessary at all. So our options would be to modify the bylaws or whatever it is they go by, where they can just have a small group of people advising the city council.
And essentially what that would be a roads committee. Since they're created by ordinance, in order to have a public meeting, we have to have a quorum. So if that were to change, it couldn't be a commission anymore. It could be an advisory committee. The big thing here is we're running into so many things now with the complexity of some of these projects, developments and road projects, that they're so time sensitive. And with the roads commission having meetings scheduled for once a month, it makes it difficult to present some of those things in a timely basis, then respond back to the city council for approval, and then get this straightened out with the developer or the engineers that are requiring answers sometimes that need to be given in a much quicker time frame.
Jack, help me out on this one. Suzanne made the comment of creating an ordinance road committee would cost more. There's no cost there. Everybody's already there. Why would it cost more?
The only cost it would essentially be for what time that our consultant showed up, our city engineer, for an additional meeting. The other people, there's no billing for their services or time.
Yeah. I mean, we pay the city engineer, he just has to be there. When we call a meeting, if we call a meeting, he's gotta be there. Well, I don't know what I don't think there'd be any big cost in that.
So Jack, with your write-up, if I add up these numbers, it's roughly 10 grand a year plus 70 hours of Nate's time and 40 hours of administrative assistant time, which is probably 10 grand in that. So we're probably talking 20 grand a year in savings by not having.
That's correct. And, you know, again, as you see in the write-up, the big costs for that are the compensation for the recording secretary, because we have to have minutes, and then the compensation of the road commissioners. Now, these costs are what it would be if we had 10 meetings a year. So, I'm sorry, 12 meetings a year. Then there's the postage and transportation expenses. That's for the annual roads tour that the commission takes to evaluate and see some of the projects that have been done. But there would be a cost savings.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at 70 hours of Nate's time, it's nearly 2 weeks of
Yeah.
effort, and that's, I would think, you know, their time we better well spent more directly on servicing the city rather than preparing and attending meetings that we have another option here to cover. So. Any other thoughts? I'm not sure if I'm hearing a consensus on we want to change this. This is enough to bring it to council.
I'm pretty much open either way. As Jack said, the timing is so many things. If you were to respect the meeting itself, you could end up spreading some of these things over how many months? If you kept them involved with everything that might be in there.
Well, just as an example, Tom, let's say we had an issue with a roads project and it was presented the day after the last roads commission meeting. Short of trying to schedule a special meeting for the roads commission, we would have to wait another month for the roads commission to meet. Then at least a minimum of 1 week is the fastest we could do it before it could get to this next, 2 weeks before the next city council. So that would be a 6 weeks time delay in making some type of a decision. If we had the committee could be called and they could meet within 3 days, and then they could give their recommendations to council, and we could get something done within a week or 10 days. It just speeds the process up so much. And again, this is no reflection on the roads commission. They've done a tremendous job. I've worked with every one of them. I respect all of them, but we're dealing with projects now that require the involvement of many types of disciplines because of their complexities. Not only engineering, legal, but also financial advice from our financial advisors. And this whole thing has evolved much more than what was originally intended of the commissions.
If there's here, what would seem to me is other commissions are going to think, well, who's next? Is it parks? Is it such and such, or this or that? So if they do go by the wayside, we have to be prepared to consider, is everything else, not sacred, but is everything else in place and effective as is?
And I'm not advocating any other studies on any of the other commissions. The only two that we have, the planning commission is required. We have to have that by statute. Everything else is voluntary. The Parks Commission is actively working on some things that aren't nearly as time sensitive. they don't have the same restraints and some of the deeper involvement that the Roads Commission does. You know, if we're working with something, whatever it is, and this doesn't necessarily pertain to commissions, but if it's outdated and it needs to be looked at and evaluated, I think we owe that to the citizens.
I know some of the people that have been on these commissions 35 to 50 years ago, probably. And as Steve has the most experience of all of us with this thing, it almost seems like some of it is to keep the community involved with what is happening within the community. If there's anything to that, have times changed so that not as effective as what it was when it first came out? Steve, you have a thought?
Well, you know, years ago, it used to be roads and bridges. That was the name of the committee. And then we figured out we didn't have any bridges in the city. So it went to roads. But, you know, back in, you know, late 90s, when residential development was kind of really just, every planning meeting had at least one plat. And roads was very active because they reviewed all those plats and then it went to parks. So but it was residential. It was the timing wasn't as critical. And at that time, we didn't have a city planner. We just had a clerk that was taking care of things. So back then the commissions did a lot more work than we do now because with the staff that we have and the way development's gone. So it's, you know, the biggest thing they do, I think, is the annual CIP, you know, setting up the 5-year plan. and you know, that's, I would think the most critical thing, but in terms of reviewing plats, like Jack said, is, you know, it could add, you know, weeks, you know, months onto the timing. And that's assuming we have a quorum at roads too. So, which obviously we've had a problem in the past, just keeping the commission full. So personally, I think from an effectiveness standpoint, that the committee approach is the way to go. It's still just 2 council members, and then it still has to go back to the full council for approval, just like it would have, you know, if it went through the roads commission. So I just think this would be more efficient and a lot more cost effective. I think that's, I don't want to minimize that. You know, it's 10 to 20 grand a year of savings by not having the commission. So.
I'd forgotten everybody that I spoke with said roads and bridges. And I thought the same thing. What bridges?
Yeah.
That's all done.
Randy, did you have a thought?
Yeah, so I just want to start with comment that Suzanne made at the beginning, where she said that roads would submit their, you know, recommendations to city council. And I kind of take exception to that. I think everything that you know comes to city council, no matter, you know, which committee or commission it comes from, we take very seriously. And you know, I don't think roads is any exception. My main concern about this really kind of comes down to a couple of things. The first is, you know, we've been begging people to become more involved with the city, and you know, this was. I realize it's not a glamorous position maybe to be on roads, but you know, we've just been, you know, stuck in a rut trying to get anybody to volunteer their time for this at all. I mean, it's just we just haven't seen anybody, and for that reason alone, I mean, this commission has been dying by attrition, basically. I mean, if we had more people who are stepping forward and saying, look, I want to take an interest and make a contribution to the city. I'd probably be a little less on board of saying we need to change this. But I think that's pretty big right there, is we're just not getting any interest from the community in order to keep this commission alive. And I think there's definitely a lot to say, look, these projects have gotten a lot more complicated, and where it really should be going almost directly to the professionals, and getting these recommendations to council in a timely manner, so that we can make the proper decision. So my feeling is, maybe this is something that we should consider. And I hate to do it. I mean, I certainly appreciate, getting, uh, feedback from our community on what to do. And we've been begging for it, and we just haven't seen it. So I guess my feeling is that at this point, if we can't get those people to be involved, and we have these more complicated issues with roads, and you're right, Steve. I mean, $10,000, $20,000, it is a lot of money that we would be saving. I would be willing to spend that money if we were actually getting the commitment from the community in order to review these decisions and forward them on to council. So I guess my feeling is that I'm kind of on board with moving the roads commission into a committee where we're just dealing with the engineer, a couple of council members, and a couple of city staff, and getting this to council as soon as possible.
So I don't know what you took exception to. I didn't mean to insult anybody. I think the Roads Commission is doing a great job. The only thing I said is that we don't usually see their minutes and hear too much. And a lot of the times they've recommended against things, and we've gone ahead and done it anyways. That's what I was talking about. Anyways, my question for Jack is, this will not cost anything. Is that what everybody is saying?
The only cost would be is we have the city engineer involved in a meeting. There would be a charge for his time.
How much?
However many hours and what his hourly rate is, he charges us $90 an hour for attendance at council meetings. So figure, maybe $180 a meeting.
Well, and you gotta include that, so if it's a 2-hour meeting, with staff, so there's some prep too. So it's not zero. It's not just Greg's.
Okay, I'm just getting this straight in my head. And the public works manager gets no extra pay for this?
No.
Okay. All right, well then maybe the committee is a good idea. I just misunderstood that these city people, I was thinking the engineer, the public works manager, and the administrator got extra pay for attending these, and we'd still have, or would we still have a recording secretary?
No, we would take our own minutes.
Okay. Well, perfect. Then I think that probably is a good idea.
Well, unless there's any other discussion, I think we got consensus to bring this to council as a road committee proposal. Any other last thoughts?
There's plenty of communication, I think, so far about not diminishing the value of the people that work there. I'm also mindful of when you say roads and bridges, and their responsibilities sounded like they were quite a bit greater 25, 30 years ago. And with the staff we have and engineer access maybe, or what have you, that times have changed. And certainly don't want to imply any less value
Okay.
for these guys or anything.
All right, well, with that, we'll move on to item 6 then. Discussion of the public forum.
On March 19th, 2020, the East Bethel City Council passed a local emergency declaration to address the COVID-19 pandemic and requirements of executive orders from the governor's office. Among other steps required to deal with these matters, the public forum was suspended through April 15th, 2020. On April 13th, 2020, the suspension was extended until such time as rescinded by City Council. Rescission would be dependent upon the issue and the relaxation of requirements issued by executive orders for social distancing items and face coverings. The suspension is temporary and was approved to minimize public contact in City Hall to comply with the guidelines from the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC. At the August 24th, 2020 City Council meeting, City Council directed this item be added to tonight's work meeting to discuss the feasibility of restoration of the public forum as item 1 on the council agenda form. The public forum was a scheduled item that was conducted before the start of the council meeting, but separate from the council agenda itself. The public forum was conducted prior to the commencement of regular council meeting and provided an opportunity for the public to address the council on items which are not on the agenda. The public forum was limited to 15 minutes and was not to be used to make personal attacks, to air personal grievances, to make political endorsements, or for political campaign purposes. Individuals were required to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Public comments during these presentations were not to be used for problem solving or reacting to comments made, but rather for hearing of citizens' concerns for informational purposes for the council. As city council meetings are currently conducted virtually with electronic participation among members and citizen presenters, reinstatement of the public forum poses several challenges for this type of platform. The main issue is the different qualities of internet service of the participants for connection to the meetings. Limited or uninterrupted services results in problems with audio issues and the availability to connect to the meetings and to communicate with the council. During the temporary suspension of the public forum, citizens have been encouraged to report their questions and concerns to city council or staff. To date, staff has received no request for an item to be discussed as a public forum matter. An alternative to a live public forum could be the utilization of the virtual setting and could operate as follows. The public forum would be scheduled again 15 minutes prior to all regular council meetings. Residents would submit their topic of concern by email to the city administrator by 4 p.m. on the Thursday preceding the council meeting. The administrator would send an invitation to the requester for the electronic access to the public forum on the Friday preceding the council meeting. The requester would log into the public forum by no later than 6:45 on the date assigned in the invitation and would be able to address the council remotely when it came their time to speak. All rules of the public forum would apply to the virtual setting for the public forum. The virtual public forum would not be broadcast on Channel 10 or YouTube. The invitees to the regular council meeting would be provided notice that login prior to 7 p.m. would occur during an ongoing public forum session to make them aware that this was not the council meeting in progress. Other items to consider with this format could include scheduling the public forum on an alternate date other than council meetings to avoid any confusion and conflict between the two gatherings, or schedule the public forum on a monthly basis, either separate from the council meeting dates or prior to the regular city council meeting to minimize the problems of virtual meeting setups and internet connections. Staff recommends that city council give staff further direction on this item on how they wish to proceed.
Discussion.
So,
Okay. Go ahead.
Randy.
thank you. So I did ask to have this put on the agenda because there has been some requests, or not even the requests, but people asking when we were going to return to the public forum, coming to council meetings, and it's been very difficult. This isn't something that we wanted to do. I know that we'd all prefer to be actually in chambers and having discussions, because I think that really is a place that is more conducive to discussion than the current format. Although I think staff has done a fantastic job of organizing these the way they are. But my concern is basically along the lines of, how can we make sure that we are hearing people's concerns when they want to bring them forward, and then how can we maybe bring that forum forward. My concern about some of the items that have been put forward is, boy, having people submit to the city administrator their concern, it makes it really tough for me, because I think we're fraught with problems with even that type of a format, just because we're kind of opening ourselves up for somebody to say, well, gee, I submitted something, but the city administrator didn't take it. And whether that's true or not, I think somebody may possibly claim that. I know that too, somebody submitting something as a video that's preset before the meeting might be a possibility as well. But I'm not sure. I think one of the biggest things that kind of drops my concern on this one a little bit is the fact that we are all available to receive comments from the public, as well as staff. So, I mean, if somebody isn't happy with the responses they're getting from staff, they can contact any one of us as counsel and express their displeasure or their concern. I know that I have brought quite a few items, to staff and to council, and they've become either part of a work discussion or as a city council matter. So I still think that people can get their concerns brought before council and staff without having a public forum. So I'm not quite sure exactly which way we want it. I'm not sure that we really want to bring them back. I think that maybe having the whole thing of asking somebody to log in and then speak their mind, may be difficult unless you are really going to take this off a city council meeting night and have it as a whole separate meeting in and of itself, for us to to discuss and have someone log in and actually do it that way. So that's my thoughts. Thanks.
Suzanne?
I think we should bring back the forum, just like where they come in and speak as a guest on the video. I think it's a good idea. I think it brings back freedom of speech for them. I don't think we should have a meeting on a separate night for this, because it's going to just be a forever session of a B session, a session of where people want to complain, or, well, some people will probably have good things to say, but I don't see why we don't have it. It hasn't made sense to me this whole time that we don't have. We've had people come in and speak on the East Bethel guest a couple of times, and I don't see any reason why it can't be we can't do the public forum that way. I think that some of you are worried about things that shouldn't be worried about. I think you're,
And what would that be?
the word's not coming to mind. I think you're anticipating bad things that I haven't even seen happen. If people have something to say, I think they should be able to say it, as long as they're, and we can mute them. It's just with a click of a button. So if they start to say something you don't like, just mute them and tell them they're muted and that they have to clean up their language or whatever it is that they're not in compliance with.
I'm sorry, Randy. I'm not sure where you're coming from on that, because the only reason we're not having a public forum right now is because of COVID and the pandemic. And just the difficulty in trying to run a separate meeting with, for a public forum. And as Randy said, and we've said many times, we're all accessible. And when we do get contacted, I'm assuming we all either talk to Jack or staff or make sure something gets, that it gets addressed, or as Randy mentioned, we bring it to council, and many of us have done that. So it was not eliminated. It was the public forum is just postponed because of the pandemic. So, Tom, you had a point?
Yeah, before the pandemic, the public forum was not heavily attended. There were sporadic instances of it, certainly. If it's an issue, I'd be interested in understanding how much of an issue is it. I have never heard a comment one way or another about it. And Kim, I haven't heard anything from you. Have you been contacted about the public forum? And how many contacts have there been? And how big of an issue is it?
Coincidentally, today was the first time I got a complaint from a resident that they wanted to speak at public forum, and we'll talk about it with the next item. But when I explained to him, well, you're talking to a council member, you already had a message in the Jack. That's the fastest way to get something done, rather than wait a week or 2 weeks for a public forum for you to come down and or attend virtually. Whereas if you want to get results, it's to contact us. So that's the first. I mean, I've had people wanting the public forum back primarily for entertainment and to see what else is going on in the city. But this is the first time I've had anyone that wanted to speak at a public forum contact me.
Just as food for thought, if it's an individual contact, a person can probably get a better understanding of what the exchanges are during the council meeting to begin with, and then bring the issue forward and during a work meeting or something, and go back to the person and ask if that represents their question.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the matter today that I got called on is something we'll touch on in the next item, but it's more of a staff level, attention matter, not a council. And keep in mind, in a public forum, there isn't the exchange that we have when we're on a phone or on an email. It's just presented to council, and they say, okay, we'll talk about it again in 2 weeks. So how, time effective is that? If you're, and I'm not downplaying a public forum. I mean, it's in the past it's been an important thing, part of our meetings. But when public forum, when I came on council, public forum was actually at the end of the meeting, and we moved it to the front of the meeting. But we got to keep in mind too, back then, think about it, council members didn't have email to be contacted on. I think we had a website, but I don't think there was any way to communicate through the website. And not everyone has cell phones and texting. So I think from a communication standpoint, we're much different than we used to be 15 years ago. So, and I want to bring that public forum back, but and I agree that having a separate meeting is not the way to go if we do this.
And these things aren't that bad to have for a work meeting. If you clarify what the person wants, they'll get more attention to what their issue is than if they would during the proper public forum format that we have. Well, proper or not, the public format we have doesn't really encourage engagement.
Right. Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something. You know, we really, I mean, during the public forum, you know, we can't just cut somebody off because we don't like what they're saying. I know that was mentioned earlier. I mean, even if we were to do this, you know, on a virtual basis, we can't just mute them because we don't like what they're saying. The only reason why we would, you know, mute somebody or cut somebody off is if they are violating our terms of the public forum format. You know, we've seen it before where there's been personal attacks. In which case, you know, we do have to kind of step forward, but you know, we can't just, you know, just because we don't like what somebody's saying is not an excuse to not hear somebody out. That's just we've never done that, and we never should. So thanks.
Actually, it wasn't about whether we liked it or not. It was about if they were saying something that was violating somebody's privacy or using foul language. And the reason I said that was because I was under the assumption that's why we don't record them or when we're in the city hall anymore. So I think we already cut people off because the whole world can't see what they're saying unless they're actually in the room. So I think we should actually bring let the whole meeting be recorded and heard by the public who are watching it. But because essentially we do cut people off because somebody doesn't like what they had to say in the past.
Well, you got to draw a distinction. We're not cutting people off from listening to counsel or counsel listening to them. We're not cutting people off from staff understanding what the issues are. And at the time when we were still meeting in person, we weren't cutting it off for audience members that were there. The only thing we cut off is their ability to broadcast on TV. And that's what was happening. There were some individuals abusing that. And as soon as we moved that off the regular agenda so it wouldn't be on TV, those individuals are only here a few times after that. And, you know, and I think we've only had a couple come in for public forum since that time. So it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter that what they're saying is broadcast on TV or not. The idea is, you know, they want something addressed. You know, they need help. They have concerns. It's about getting that communication directly to the council members. And obviously, the public forum it's effective because we're all there. We're all listening at the same time. But you know, as Tom said, and I alluded to also, Randy did too, is you know, we can discuss things on the phone. We can discuss things by email. You know, we can, you know, be much more nimble and quick in terms of addressing issues. And you know, if that's truly it. So if that's truly your intent, you know, what we're doing right now is going to be more effective. So.
Well, in a way it is, in a way, but it's not effective for all of us because if somebody comes to Tom or to Randy with an issue and Randy takes it to Jack, it gets solved or it gets ignored or the person's told nothing can be done, but the rest of us don't know anything about it. So we can't say, oh no, maybe that ordinance shouldn't exist, or maybe, you know, whatever the complaint was, maybe the rest of us feel it should have been solved a different way. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying that, I'm saying that just one of us can't be right. I might say something to somebody and talk to Jack about it, and we might just say, okay, we'll take care of this, and none of you guys know about it. And then 6 months later, you find out about it and everybody's mad or thinks it should have been handled a different way. So that's all I'm saying about that. I think it should come to all of us so we can all hear, form our own opinion, and react accordingly.
Well, keep in mind though, that the public forum is just a listening session. And then that's gotta go back to staff, and then it's gotta come back to a work meeting. I mean, the example I'll talk about right now is I got a call this afternoon by a resident who's having an issue with neighborhood cats, and evidently a lot of cats. And his wife was upset that she couldn't come to public forum to talk about it. Well, that would have been in 2 weeks, right? So if we had a public forum at city council meeting, it would have been on the 14th. Then would have to wait for staff to do something and come back to work meeting beginning of October. Meanwhile, me spending 20 minutes on the phone with this person and then that person talking to Jack today. I mean, we're already starting to get stuff together, and we're going to talk about it at the work meeting tonight. So, I mean, that's, and in the end, they were happy that they didn't try to do this at public forum, because now, there's obviously going to be a little more quicker action by doing it this way. There's no decisions that are made. There's no, it's just getting people in the right direction to try to get resolution on some of this stuff. It's not something necessarily that had to be broadcast to the whole city. But again, we would just been listening at the time. So, I mean, the public forum will come back. It's just, do we want to do it now with electronic version of it and find a way to make it effective? So.
And to some extent, the public forum is a courtesy to the residents. And in my opinion, it should be confined to residents. It shouldn't be statewide or countywide or anything like that. But what has happened with some of this public forum is that these are staged for causes, not for issues. There's a cause that people are taking up. And it's very limited the amount of people that have done that sort of thing. But part of their cause is to vilify and threaten people within our community, which is wrong. And Steve, you fixed that. It became a lot better. There were some understandings that came with it. But your example right now is perfect. Instead of waiting for 2 weeks or something to bring something to the council, somebody has contacted a member. The member and the city administrator have thought about it, looked at it, and the person's probably going to be far happier to have that kind of an interaction. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I would just like to jump in here for just a moment before we end this discussion, and just kind of address the public in general that, you have the opportunity to speak to staff. You have the opportunity to speak to a council member. And as Suzanne said, if somebody addresses something to me and I address it with Jack, and it kind of dies there because there's nothing we can do, and I turn back to that person who is making the request. If you're not happy with that response, there are 4 other members of city council that you can contact. Don't stop with one person. So, I realize that, that may be a little more legwork than coming to a public forum. But, there's been many times where there has been certain members of the public who have contacted every single one of us on a particular topic before a meeting. And I remember at least, a couple of instances where that's been the case. So you can actually, talk to everyone who is involved in making these decisions. But again, I don't think that, we should worry about not hearing about every little request that may, come to, one member or another. because there's still an avenue for people to you know make their you know ideas known. And look, social media has been very active on certain topics, and I watch it, and that's kind of where I get some of my requests is from social media, as people making demands and wanting things to happen. So there's definitely outlets out there besides the public forum for people to actually get their message across. Thanks.
I haven't said too much. I just want everybody to know that we haven't canceled it. If, like Steven said, if you want to get a hold of somebody, there's the 5 of us, there's city staff. So, like I said, you're hearing all this stuff that we canceled the public forum. We haven't canceled it. So I just want to get that word out.
So is there any interest in starting up public forum again as a separate meeting? We've done this for our closed sessions and a few other things. We have a separate meeting before our regular council meeting. Sort of what Jack outlined is the only practical way is someone wants to speak to council at a public forum, they gotta let us know who it is. And they get sent an invite, and then they're on the screen just like with us. It's not broadcast on TV, but they get the audience of all 5 of us at once. Is there an interest in doing that at this time? And keep in mind that we just had a discussion, I think last month, of whether or not we should go back to live meetings. And we all agreed to stay virtual for now, and just we'll revisit the issue as we need to, and as the situation in the community changes. So if we go back to live meetings, we'll go back to having live public forums as well, just as we were before. So is there a desire to have a special meeting before every council meeting just for public forum?
I'm not understanding why we would do that and not just have the 15 minutes before this meeting.
That's my suggestion, is to do it 15. It'd be a separate meeting. It has to be a separate meeting because this is broadcast and public forum's not. So it's just a little more legwork from city staff. But yeah, I see it functionally to be done. We're already, it comes down to it, we're already here sitting at 6:45 anyway, so it's not changing our schedule at all.
I would be for that. 15 minutes before our meeting. Sorry, Randy.
No, that's quite all right. You didn't finish your thought. So I'm not opposed to doing it. I guess my feeling is that we've seen how often people actually need to come to a public forum, and I guess my feeling is that to continue with saying, look, contact your city staff, contact your city council person, and if we were to go back to, or if we wanted to do the virtual public forum, my preference would be that we take it off the nights that we're having a city council meeting and move it to the night that we're having a work meeting. Because I think then if it goes a little bit long, and I don't know, Jack, if that's possible, but that we could, maybe make that go a little bit longer rather than holding up a city council meeting where we may have important business to do. And I realize that that's less often than city council meetings, but to me, I think that would be a better option than having it before an actual council meeting. Thanks.
I think that's a good thought. Because it'll be potentially less disruption to the city council meetings, where at times we'll have presentations and other people are waiting to do things. So So if we do it at a work meeting, it's literally mostly just our time. If we do go a little bit longer, but I think we would still, have to maintain that 15-minute maximum I mean, if there's a big enough issue that there's that enough people talking, it doesn't happen very often. It hasn't happened very often the past 6 years that I remember. So, but that's an idea if we do it. I have no problem with that.
One quick comment, if I may. I am looking at some of the references to this, and I apologize for not having a particular reference. This refers to something called Open Public Meetings Act. Does not require that citizens be allowed to participate and speak at council/commission meetings other than public hearings. The Open Public Meetings Act merely specifies that the public has a right to attend these meetings except for executive session. It is up to the governing body to determine in their rules of procedure if and for how long citizens will be allowed to speak, if and for how long speak at meetings. And another reference says that the council's purpose is to conduct business. And that's the priority, is conducting business over the public forum and I don't disagree with public forum, but so we have an understanding, it's not written in the law someplace that it's required. Our job is to conduct business, and I got 6 cents in here. Thank you.
If one thing to keep in mind too is if we do this and start a virtual public forum, again, it won't be broadcast. It won't be on our website. I'm not so sure that is going to satisfy most of the comments that I've also seen out there on social media about the public forum not being broadcast anymore, about how city council's hiding everything and we're not being transparent and those kind of discussions of not being forward on things, which is not true, but because it's not going to be broadcast, that's the impression. So if we're reacting, if by reinstituting the public forum, we're reacting to those comments, we're not going to satisfy anyone. If we start the public forum, it should be to those individuals who truly wanted to speak to all the council and had an issue and would rather talk to all of us at once and present their issue rather than send out an email or pick up the phone. So I'm not so sure what either council or the public will gain by reinstituting the public forum. And I think we all agree that we're all available and can be contacted, and we're going to follow up on something when we're contacted.
It's safe to say there's no interest on any council person's part in deferring the ability for anyone to address the council in a forum. It just, with the rules and requirements we're dealing with right now, it's not really practical or possible.
Jim, you got any thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, keep in mind too that there are certain technical difficulties in people connecting to this, especially depending on what your internet service level is. It's also very frustrating if you want to speak to council and you're having difficulty connecting. The only other comment that I would have is that if we do establish this as a new policy for virtual public forums, is that we establish some way to make sure that if there are multiple people wishing to speak on the same subject, that we can have some way to identify that and have a spokesman speak for the group.
Yeah, the only thing I have, Steve, is I agree with Randy. I kind of like the work meeting idea, the 15 minutes before. I think that probably worked the best. If we went that way.
Suzanne, you're in agreement with that, right?
I think they should be able to speak at all of our meetings, even this one. And I think it's, I think there's First Amendment issues not allowing that, but I have to do some research on that.
That's been discussed a few times, including our city attorney on that. So.
Yeah.
And to the effect that it's not a First Amendment, it's not violating First Amendment, right?
Steve, wasn't it you who implemented the public forum to begin with?
I think so.
We didn't have this before. My understanding was, if I recall correctly, was you were the one who really instituted this and wanted to make it happen. Is my recollection? I could be wrong.
You know, I was thinking that too, but I'm gonna accept the fact that I'm too old to remember everything. So, the only thing I remember is when I came on council, when I was early on the first time in council, the public forum was at the end of the meeting, and at that time our meetings always went to like 11 o'clock. So one of the first things I know I did is I pushed it to get to the front of the meeting. So, but it could be. I suggested town hall. I mean that was. I'll take responsibility for that, but I'm not sure if I'm responsible for a public forum. Well, I'm not hearing consensus on pushing this on restarting the public forums.
My only thought would be whatever's practical. I mean, that's the main thing. We're not required, but to allow comment, whatever's the most practical way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we gotta keep in mind, you know, in the kind of the times we're at right now, that, you know, everyone's finding alternative ways to get things done. And although we've all been there available to everyone in the past, I think we're emphasizing that now is to contact your council person or city staff. And I'm indifferent. I like the idea of just doing it at the work meeting to make it easier from a functionality standpoint. But we can certainly do it on council nights too, and just you know, maybe we started at 6:30 instead of 6:45 and ended at 6:45, and that way we leave ourselves enough time. I do think it's important we start a regular business meeting at 7 o'clock. Because I think it's frustrating to people when we don't start on time. So.
And that's our requirement, is to conduct business. That is our primary function.
Well, my recommendation at this point is that we bring this to council as a meeting on the nights that we have a work meeting. And my reason for that is, you know, this is again something that, you know, we or staff have really not had any experience with, which is involving multiple people getting involved in a meeting. And I'd like to, you know, at least make sure, if nothing else, to do it on a night where we are not having to have, you know, deal with important issues when we're having to make decisions on a night of a city council. And at least, you know, if it's council's wish to go forward with that, that at least, you know, we have that one night, you know, to kind of at least try it out and see how it works out. So that's my recommendation.
Well, I'd agree with bringing this to council on the 14th and have discussion at then we can decide how we want to proceed. That's one option. It sounds like the options we're talking about, whether we do it at just the council meetings, whether we do it at the work meeting, whether, like Suzanne suggested, we do it at all the meetings. my thought is if we do it, we actually do it at the council meetings. I'd rather have it on council nights than a work night, but, 'cause I think people don't understand what our work meetings are for anyway. I think they understand our city council meetings for clear. And then, they'll give time, Jack, to come up. I mean, I don't think it's too complicated to come up with an approach to have an earlier meeting. So then on our next council meeting, we can decide what nights we do it, and then if we do it, what nights we do it, and then what time we start. So
May I make a suggestion? That something like this be thought out, possibly you and Jack, whatever, and have one person, probably the mayor, explain that the conversation has taken place and that the council is interested in providing some access for public comment. And we're working on a way to facilitate that sort of thing, or some such thing like that.
I think we could talk about that at the council meeting, at our next council.
But rather than having a five-party discussion over that, it's kind of a, you know what I mean?
Well, keep in mind, there's no discussion at public forum.
Yeah,
And,
it's hard to bite your tongue sometimes.
yeah, I know we all kind of shy away from that sometimes, but that's how we keep that order. So, well, let's put on the next agenda. We'll discuss it at council then. Any last thoughts for anyone? All right, it's 9 o'clock. But we got this last item. I'd say we just continue. Jack?
Item 7, City Ordinance, Chapter 10, Article 5, Farm Animals. On May 20th, 2015, City Council approved an amendment to City Ordinance, Chapter 10, Article 5, Farm Animals regarding the keep of chickens on lots of 3 acres or less. The ordinance prior to this amendment only allowed chickens on lots larger than 3 acres. The fee for an interim use permit for the keeping of 6 chickens is $100. This charge is used to cover the inspection for the IUP and costs for any follow-up complaint or compliant checks. Fee of $50 is charged for the renewal of the IUP. Just for council's information, there has never been a request for an IUP renewal for the keeping of chickens, and currently we only have about 10 IUPs out for the keeping of chickens. The current ordinance allows the keeping of up to 6 chickens and prohibits the keeping of roosters on lots greater than 0.5 acres but less than 3 acres. Additional requirements for the keeping of chickens are outlined in the council report. As a result of this request, council is requested to examine and discuss the following: the number of chickens that can be kept on lot sizes of less than 3 acres, the minimum lot size for the keeping of chickens, keeping of roosters, changing the process for the issuance of an IUP for the keeping of chickens on lot sizes of less than 3 acres from the requirements of Planning Commission and City Council approval to administrative issue, the IUP for the keeping of chickens, and further the clarification of Article 10, 151, 2A and 2B under Chapter 4 Animals. There's some confusion over that. Some of that needs to be clarified and reworded to avoid any inconsistency between that requirement and this portion of the ordinance on the keeping of 6 chickens or less on lot sizes less than 3 acres. At this time, staff is seeking direction from council on this matter and discussion of those items recommended.
Discussion. Suzanne?
I personally, and I've said this before, I think this whole ordinance is ridiculous. In Minneapolis, people can have chickens with no restrictions, no fees, and they have city lots. So why do we even have these rules? And why would we even go inspect for chickens? It doesn't make any sense. That's my opinion on this. I think we should get rid of the entire ordinance.
I'm not sure. Minneapolis does have restrictions. Their restrictions aren't as stringent as ours, and they do have a fee. I think their fee is $30 for a permit for the keeping of chickens. And that's what this discussion is about, to review some of the requirements that we have and see if council wants to amend or change or modify some of them.
So this is one of these items that came to me as a request from a couple of our residents. Actually, this was a social media topic, and I've had at least a couple of requests directly to me to address this issue. The first one is to, in reference to the Minneapolis ordinances, they do not have any lot requirements. I mean, it's city lot, you can have chickens. There is a $30 application fee for 1 year from 1 to 6 chickens for $30. 7 to 15 is $55. 16 to 30 is $80. And the renewal fee would be the same as what the original application fee. As for a rooster, they just have a flat out fee of $105. And it kind of amazes me that they allow roosters in the city limits, but nevertheless, they do. I'm, I've had the request of, number one, people wanting to have a rooster. On the half acre to 3 acre limit. I also have a request on having less than 5 acres, basically down to 0, to have chickens. I've also had somebody comment to me that, gee, I can get a permit for free for my dogs, and why then should I have to pay a fee for chickens? So I think these are definitely worthy things to talk about, because it is $100 just to keep just a few chickens in our city, and that is what I consider to be a rather large fee. And I realize that the city does have things that they need to pay for, which is time to go and verify the IUP and make sure that there's the proper permitting involved, which is why I also kind of requested that maybe instead of having to go through the planning commission / city council, that it become an administrative process. So that's why this is before council this evening.
I mean, I agree with the fact that the cost seems not proportionally higher than it should be. I like the idea of just making it a staff decision. I don't know why there's a need to go through planning or council or something like that, unless this is a significant issue. And then staff can always, we always have the option of bring it to council, not make an administrative decision. Yeah, when I see places with chickens in the yard, I love it. My last place, they had chickens behind us and had a rooster, and I personally, I didn't mind the rooster at all. So partially because it never crowed at 6 a.m. It crowed at 2 p.m. So I didn't have a morning issue, but it reminds you that we are, living out in the country. So
yeah, I've had one comment about chicken, and one person, one family. That is the placement of the coop next to his lot line, and the smell and the disposal of the waste. Minneapolis, we've had discussion about Minneapolis. I'd be curious what Columbia Heights and Spring Lake Park have as far as. Minneapolis isn't going to have a whole lot of chickens. Somebody can have them, and that's more power to them. but it's unlikely you're gonna see a whole lot of chickens in Minneapolis. A lot more
30 chickens out here is different than 30 chickens in Minneapolis. I can't imagine.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So do we want to see how we can massage this ordinance to address some of these issues? In the past, for something like this, we've sent this to planning to deal with. Seems like evidently every 5 years we revisit the animal ordinance. So we want to send this to planning.
Is that planning or is this our issue?
By statute, this does not have to go to planning. That's up to the council's directive if they wish them to give an opinion on it and maybe some recommendations from their standpoint.
I think if we make recommendation changes, I think it's worthwhile to send those recommendations to planning so they know what we're thinking. So where do you want to go with this?
Personally, I think we could just do it, just eliminate the things on there that are absolutely the cost and the rooster rule and the acreage sizes and just some of the things that are on the request to examine and discuss the following area. Oh, and I did want to say, I did not research the prices. I just went to a friend of mine who lives down there, just got 4 chickens and she didn't have to pay. So I don't know if she got a deal or knew somebody, but that was why I said they didn't have to pay. I didn't really research it. But I think we should leave it in council. I don't think it needs to go to the planning, make another step, but that's my opinion.
I can go either way. Sending it to planning, maybe the better way to go. Like you say, maybe get some more comments on it. But then, again, bringing it straight back to council would be fine with me too. I mean, I do think that what we're trying to do is make this less restrictive on people. Now, whether or not we should maybe even change some of the requirements to make sure that you're notifying your neighbors and not having any complaints about that administratively if we were to change it in that fashion. Maybe that's something we can do. And I don't know if we can, because here's the other part. I don't think roosters will really violate our noise ordinance. I don't know if we can, make that as a particular requirement as part of the change, that if someone was to get a rooster, that, if a neighbor does complain that they may have to, not have roosters. So, but I think that it's worthy of discussion to bring, at the very least, to city council. But if the rest of council feels that this is the way to go, I'm fine with sending it to planning. Thanks.
My suggestion to council is that staff prepare a revision to this ordinance based on the discussion we had tonight. It's actually only a few aspects of it we've been talking about. And then when, bring it to council, we can make decisions on those few items. And then at the same time, let planning know that we're doing this. And if they have any comments, they can send it to council. It's not to send the ordinance to them, just let them know what's going on. And if they want to add anything to it, we'll certainly hear their perspective.
In 2014, we discussed and we're changing the height of accessory buildings to, I believe, 14 feet for people that have, the purpose being so many people have motorhomes and such that they park in there. And 8 foot, like the ordinance said, just didn't work. And the people that got that from the council in the planning and zoning, several of them threw a fit. They raised holy hell. And you can't do that. Can't do that. And it's sometimes that was based on personal opinion. I believe it wasn't based on anything reasonable or anything. But if we're expecting planning to come up with some kind of an answer for us, I don't know if I'd hold my breath.
Okay.
We're talking about an ordinance change, so there'll have to be a public hearing on this. With the notice requirements, we couldn't address this until the 28th of September. Planning Commission meets the 22nd. If we want to run it by them and have the public hearing at the Planning Commission, we can certainly do it there. So if you want to do it, but the Planning Commission, it certainly wouldn't affect the timeline of this.
Yeah, I think we keep it here and do the public hearing here. And if planning's meeting in the meantime between that last meeting in September, that gives them an opportunity for feedback and provide that feedback to council. So. Does that sound like a plan for everyone? Okay. That's our last item. I did want to add on to this. I don't want to discuss it too much because it's not worthy of it yet. But yeah, I mentioned earlier about the cats. And the one thing that I learned today is with all of our ordinances and all the animals we talk about, we have no ordinance relating directly to cats. And so that's just kind of I just want to throw that out there for an item to think about. But there's a resident that sounds like they have some significant issues with a neighbor with a lot of cats, and Jack and staff are working on it right now. So we'll see if it ever comes back to council, but it's something we need to think about.
So you say we're going to start herding cats. Is that what you're saying, Steve?
I don't know how you do that, you know? I have a hard time herding my one cat. So is there anything else anyone wants to add before we sign off here? All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Jack, can you take roll call vote, please?
Councilperson Harrington.
Aye.
Councilperson Plassance.
Aye.
Councilperson Ronning.
Aye.
Councilperson Urkel.
Aye.
Mayor Voss.
Aye. And with that, our motion passes. Our meeting is adjourned. Everyone have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. You all have a good one.